Okay, welcome to our final crossroads discussion of the semester. Tonight, or today, it's open mic, essentially whatever issues you want to talk about. So if there's anything that you want to follow up on, if there are any new issues you want to bring up, or anything else, please feel free to do so. Are there anything, I know some of you have been here before, are there any issues you felt were not fully covered, or anything you didn't get a chance to bring in?
Probably immigration.
Okay.
Like Lake and White trial. We can discuss that for a little bit.
Go ahead. What do you think was, you think that needs, what do you think needs discussing?
I think it highlights the fact that we should do a check on people who's coming in the country. Because there are a lot of people that come in the country illegally. I also think that undocumented immigrants who are here in the country, they should have a chance at the citizenship. Like they shouldn't be deported. I also agree that immigrants who came to this country that broke the law, they should be deported. They should be sent packing. But to generalize all immigrants are bad, that's not true. It's not all immigrants are bad.
Can someone close that door?
Yeah, I definitely agree with most of what you said. I think and it's not necessarily just like the Biden and Harris administration. I don't know if it's fair to point to one administration for such a big issue. But I definitely feel like, especially in the midst of the Lake and Riley trial and some of the details coming out, but that shouldn't allow people to just say that all illegal or legal or otherwise immigrants are bad. I think, I definitely agree that's a horrible notion. Nobody should, just put a whole group into that one big basket and say that they're all bad. It's horrible. But it definitely needs to be recognized that at this point, we're like much better off than most countries, so don't think that I'm implying otherwise. But I think we definitely, as a society, have maybe come to the conclusion that we have a lot more internal issues that we need to focus on before we can open up our resources to other people inside and outside of the U.S.
So let me ask a loaded question. Do you think the issue has become overly politicized?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
I think it's like, and I've said it before, but it was really frustrating in the kind of, beginning stages of this election. Now, throughout the whole campaign, actually, it's just like issue after issue of things that, I'm going to fix this, and then the other person's like, I'm going to fix that too, and it's like, okay, well, you guys have been saying you're going to fix it for a long time, and you're just fixing it, so I just don't know how we're going to keep running on the same thing, but it's kind of to be expected, I guess, with our two-party system to some degree.
So you're skeptical that anything in the near future is going to happen significantly?
I don't know. I think Trump is could be kind of a wild card in a sense. It's like, yes, we've seen what he did in his first term, and I think he's gonna, for the most part, stick to his goals. But now, obviously, the goals have changed a little bit. Time has gone on. But I think some of these issues are so big that I don't think we can see too much of a change in the near future. I think it takes a while to balance some of these things out. And obviously, when we look at the economy lags behind a lot of political issues. Like maybe we won't see an impact on the economy for something that happens today until 3-4 years from now. So.
Okay. Yep.
I think overpopulation is going to become a problem in the future. Like,
the interesting thing about that is that overpopulation was a big concern for people for many decades, especially post-World War II into the 60s and 70s as lifespans increase. But in fact, I'm not the expert in this, but from what I understand, all of that is changing right now in that birth rates have dropped around the world tremendously, and in fact, a steady state population or even population decline in many areas may be the larger concern in the near future.
Underpopulation
Has become
has become a really big concern. Underpopulation, which is really interesting because we always think of like America becoming bigger, but like people aren't having kids anymore.
I feel like right now too, not that like people are deciding if they want to have children based on like conflict halfway across the world, but to some degree I feel like there's like this tension of like we haven't had a big conflict in a while. Obviously, like I want to include the Cold War, but also not because there weren't many actual shots fired. But I don't know. I remember one of my professors telling me that towards the beginning of the semester. I don't remember if it was Dr. Miner or Dr. G, but he said there was an article that came out where Putin was basically asking people to try to have children on their lunch breaks because their population is like declining so badly. He's telling people, go home on your lunch breaks, do what you need to do for us to have a population again. And I thought that was kind of like a, whoa, okay.
And am I correct that China has dropped its one-child policy? Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Isn't
Yeah.
it too?
Is it two? Oh, so they still maintain a restriction.
I believe so.
Okay. Okay.
That creates a whole other issue of its own of people not wanting to have girls because then the family, bloodline can't be carried on, which is, has very horrible impacts.
So how big an issue is this for the United States, do you think?
I know that people are concerned about a possible nationwide abortion ban. So people that I've spoken to have been saying that they're concerned that if they do get pregnant and like want to have kids, and by then further on they realize that there's complications, that if they were to have the child, then that would be detrimental to their health. So I think that's also why people are kind of concerned about having kids as well, is because they might not be able to have the resources to help them further on down the line.
All right. Others? Are there other issues, or we want to keep talking about this, or are there other issues you want to bring up?
Would you guys like a niche issue?
Go ahead.
Okay. Any of y'all follow the UNG trial?
Yes.
It was finally,
Yeah.
It was so chaotic. Okay, they finally, I think he agreed that, or I'm forgetting the word now, but like he agreed to his crime so he would get a lesser punishment. But there was a whole like big thing that happened because they were going to give him, I think, like 35 years or something, unless he admitted to it, and then it was just probation.
You can't
And
go
then-
to the city of Atlanta.
Yeah.
Oh no.
It was such a chaotic trial. And I think, yeah, and then there was, I think some people that are still on trial with the like YSL thing, but they keep having to delay stuff. I know there was one that was recently, because there was a guy in the courthouse bathroom that was a witness was smoking weed, and they had to delay the trial for that. And it's just, it's like, niche topic though, it's just, I never get a chance to talk
I
about
love
it.
that. If
I'm involved
anyone
in
hasn't
that.
heard about it, it's what basically he took money that he got from the music industry and just funneled it into gangs. Or a
Yeah, or
gang.
like they're trying to say that it is a gang and that they were also doing like arms deals and stuff.
Yeah.
But he was trying to say it's more of a music label, and so there was that like back and forth whether it was a gang music label or both.
Yeah.
Because other people were going to plead against them, right? Like they were going to come forward for their lesser sentence if they sell him out.
Yes, but there was an issue with one of the main witnesses.
So
It was
funny.
so bad. Okay, so when he first got on the trial, he was like, he wouldn't even agree that it was his name or his birthday or like how old he was. No, he would say
said
Fifth
grown.
Amendment. Yeah. Yeah, just grown. It was so bad. And then the judge ended up basically witness tampering because he made a private meeting with the witness to say like, hey, you can speak on the stand, but he didn't tell the defense attorney that he was having that meeting. So the judges ended up having to be switched, and then just
Yeah, with Charleston, that's the witness that went viral all over social media and everything. I think that's the first time I've ever seen in a court case somebody get immunity on the stand. So he was allowed to say whatever he wanted to, and he looked straight at the judge. He was like, "Are you sure?" Asked him like 5 different times, like, "Are you sure I can say whatever I want to?" And he just completely confessed to a crime that was unrelated to the case because of federal immunity. And they tried everything they could at the DA's office down in Atlanta to like hit them with the RICO charges, but the defense the prosecuting team did a terrible job picking witnesses. Fulton County State provided plea deals for so many YSL members to try to get them to convict their friend of the crimes that they had cited him with, and they just weren't helpful at all. They could have literally asked somebody off the street to come into the court, and they probably would have helped a little bit more. But it was an interesting case because they were trying to tie his lyrics to his affiliation with YSL as a gang versus a music label, and I'm not necessarily sure. I'm pretty sure the case that his attorney tried making was that this is a form of art, and that you can't necessarily say your artistic abilities are equivalent to your criminal activity, which I do see the case there because people have drawn some pretty messed up stuff, and you don't see them going to jail for their depictions unless you're living in a specific type of regime or something where you're not allowed to say those things through any form of expression. So it was just really interesting in general, and like she said, he's just not allowed to come back to Atlanta for a couple years, but he did make a plea deal that was pretty much in his favor. He can continue to make music. He actually does get to associate with one YSL member who's Gunna. He's another famous rapper, and they make some pretty good music. So it's not like that's gonna stop. I heard some jokes online saying that he's gonna change his name from Young Thug to Mature Thug because now he can't rap about criminal activity anymore. So I'm just interested in seeing where his career goes from here. But that is a very niche topic.
That has been an issue, though, whether or not song lyrics can be used as testimony in court cases.
If you draw, for example, it makes me think of a specific case, as a true crime case, the Slenderman case, where those two girls thought I don't want to think about it too hard actually. And she drew a really messed up picture but I think it might have been her confession where she drew the picture out or something, but let's say that she did draw it before the crime was committed. It's hard to say, or even after the crime was committed, but before confessing to the police. It's hard to not associate that with some sort of premeditation or I don't know, it's difficult because I want to say yes, it's a creative outlet, it doesn't have to be true. Just because someone writes a song, it could be by somebody else. They could have bought the entire song from somebody else could have written it. So I think it's really interesting to see if lyrics in the future will be included, or if they're going to have to make something specific stating that they can't be. I think it's very interesting.
I mean, I think it's happening a lot. Y'all know YNMW in LA? Yeah. He got convicted and arrested for murder about 3 or 4 years ago, and they used one of his song lyrics in court. But the lyric was literally him just completely admitting, he's yeah, I killed this guy. It was a confession song. So I don't know where you draw the line right there, because it is a creative outlet, but I see it as any other form of expression. So I guess it does have to, there's a combination between intent, premeditation, and a whole bunch of other factors, and that's why witnesses are more important than the actual lyrics themselves. You can use the lyrics as a basis for your suspicion, but then you have to go find the people that are involved in either making the song or in the criminal activity, and that's a lot easier said than done, because I could have saw somebody on the street and he could have said something really inspirational to me, and I used that as a lyric, but it could have alluded to me consenting to some sort of criminal activity. Fine, excellent.
I will never. I'm surprised that there are usually some verdicts in court cases. I'm surprised.
Well, that's the issue now, is whether or not that can be legitimate evidence.
Would it be similar if somebody committed, like, let's say, an attempted assassination attempt on a political figure, and then you go and the FBI or whatever, I guess, whoever has jurisdiction goes and investigates their property and they find like a journal or a diary, are they allowed to use that as evidence?
If they have a proper warrant,
If they have a
they
proper
can do
warrant?
that.
Because that kind of makes me think the same thing. It's almost like a manifesto, because for a lot of people, their art is kind of like not just their creative. Oh yeah, it's their creative outlet. It's how they could express themselves in like the same way some people go home and write a journal and they write poems and whatnot. So I could see it being used like.
Well, what if somebody paints a picture of a crime that of a crime committed? Is that evidence?
I think that's evidence for premeditation. If you have like a picture of you like stabbing somebody that you drew a year ago, and then a year later you stab the same person in that picture, I think there's grounds right there to say that, hey, you've been thinking about this for a while.
Okay.
Well, I know that one of my favorite authors, John Grisham, he writes a lot of true crime novels. So, like, if he, for whatever reason, if something comes out that he like committed a murder or something, and then he used it as his basis for
He's
his
got no
book,
place to hide.
Yeah, could that also be evidence?
Well, that's the question. That's really what the issue is.
There's a
Is
woman that did that. She wrote like a website blog about like how to get away with killing your husband.
I've
Like
heard about that.
detailed just everything, and then proceeded to carry out, I think, the least organized, messiest, stupidest murder I think I've ever heard of. She went to like his job where there's security cameras and he was a professor, there's witnesses. It was like the worst carried out crime ever. And it's just
maybe
like,
she wanted to be caught.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. I mean, that's something that, again, I'm not the criminal justice expert, but that's something that's well known in criminal justice circles. Is sometimes people commit crimes in order to get caught. They want to get taken into custody.
Well, because back on the song lyrics, if I know that rappers usually have feuds with each other, and like Eminem has written multiple songs about lots of people. With the whole P Diddy case going on right now, he has a song that he's said that P Diddy's like committed the murder of, I think it's like Tupac. Yeah. And could his lyrics, if we're using song lyrics in court, could that be used as
I mean, that's what prosecutors are trying to do. Yeah, they're trying to use that.
I think also partly for that case is that there's people that are trying to also say that they were like witnesses to him talking about, and so there's like other people that are involved saying that he didn't do that.
But like the criminal justice system is so tricky because is that murder or is that conspiracy or is that affiliation? And so like the prosecuting team has to do their due diligence and cite them for the right crimes, because if you go to court and you get cited for a very specific statute, then all your defense attorney has to do is say like, according to subclause A, B, C, and D, not separately but all together, he did not meet the definition of murder as seen by the court or the judge. And that's up entirely to the jury to decide, I guess. If it's a jury trial, if it's a bench trial, it's one person who gets to decide, like, hey, he didn't meet the she didn't meet the qualifications for murder, but this would have been it for manslaughter, so if you would have charged him with that, then you could have got them, but you can't have double jeopardy, so you can't bring them back to court, so they have, like, a very tricky job, and that's why you can't really talk about a court case when it's happening. I think one of the most frustrating things as, like, the public is we've been seeing stuff in conspiracies on TikTok or on like online, and we feel like we know more than the courts actually do. But they probably have just as much information as we do. They're trying to be meticulous in how they approach the court case, because if just like one slip up can let a criminal get away. Same way as like we can complain on the opposite end by by citing somebody with a pretty general, I guess, law, you can put somebody away who may have not committed a crime just based off of pure allegation, testimony, witness, and providing all these factors. It's pretty ugly. I've talked about this a lot, but I think that we have a retributive justice system here. We like to punish people, make them pay their penance. Our form of justice in the United States doesn't necessarily account for rehabilitation, and that's like a really controversial topic right now. Is whether I think for a while people were considering should we send first responders like some sort of person that can de-escalate or like psychologists on scene. And we have like this most recent case of the police officer who got thrown water near his vicinity, and he committed what was declared murder by like internal investigations. But police officers inherently have immunity, just like the president has immunity. If the president didn't have immunity, then they'd be a war criminal. So it's just like the way the system is set up is very specific. You have to know how to play the game. That's why not anybody can be a lawyer. You have to pass the bar in the state that you practice in. You can't take the bar in Georgia and go defend in California. It kind of seems like half-assed backwards to me, but it makes sense because it's worked for so long, I guess, and people like the status quo. Like, how else are we supposed to? Laws are tricky because you live in a country with so many people, such a large population. How can you write something that's not too specific, but generalizable enough to the greater populace? And that's just for federal laws. Then on the state level, you have like a whole other game to play. Then you have city ordinances, which like also doesn't. I guess the federal system makes things tricky.
To me, concept of, and it's not like a new thing, but just like live streaming these massive criminal court cases that gather such an audience. Like, I could not have had my face closer to my phone during the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. I could not take my eyes off of it. And I just feel like it's really interesting that like the public sometimes can form just based off of whatever they want to hear, honestly, their own opinion, and then the jury can come back with something totally different and everyone's pissed and this is an injustice. And just because, you know, there's a camera in the courtroom, I think it's strange that people will like, of course you can make your own opinion and feel a certain way about how a case should play out, but for people to be upset, like severely upset about it afterwards, unless it was just an insanely bad judgment by the jury. I just think it's really fascinating that the public is so involved, but also not involved at all.
Holds the judges accountable, honestly, because you hear so many cases that happened not even just like 30 years ago, but like in the 1990s where people are getting released now because evidence has come forward where they weren't guilty of the crime, but there was no way for us to know that, and so we just had to trust what was happening in the courtroom. And that's why I brought up the idea of retribution versus rehabilitation. You look at the recidivism rate, and I don't think we have a criminal justice system that teaches people to not commit crimes again. I think we have a criminal justice system that makes criminals, because if you punish somebody once so severely and put them on, I guess, like a probationary sentence that is so restrictive that they mess up one time, it keeps them in the system rather than allowing them opportunity to grow and to learn, or offering some sort of educational programs. And then you look at like characteristics of people that tend to end up committing crimes, and usually starts at a young age, and there's other psychological factors that play into crime that we only look at it through. It's a wide funnel, and we only look at it through the bottom end instead of like the top end.
Yeah.
So
Do you think that all crimes deserve rehabilitation? Or do you think it's just some crimes?
this is gonna show my morality, but yeah, I'm big on forgive but not forget. So like if somebody commits premeditated murder, first degree, do they deserve a chance to re-enter in society as like a normal functioning person? Probably not. But to completely alienate and ostracize them, given the way that the law system is working in the first place, they typically won't get released. But if you committed second degree murder or third degree or even involuntary manslaughter, like you accidentally ran over somebody who illegally crossed the road, pedestrians have the right of way. You killed that person, but it could have not been your fault, and you'll still get punished for that crime. I think that you should get a different sentence than somebody who blatantly runs over a crowd of people. So it's all depending on the situation. But yeah, first degree or like serial like killers, I don't necessarily. I think that there's probably something inherently wrong with them. Now, that's a huge conversation that used to happen back in the 50s, 60s, where they're like, oh, should these people get thrown into jail or should they go to mental wards? But now that mental health is such a predominant issue or salient issue amongst the public, it's kind of taboo to talk about because mental health is a spectrum and you have so many different, I guess, ailments or ailments you could call it. My dad always told me to think about it like hygiene. So you have like physical health, which is like you take care of yourself by showering, grooming, making sure you're presentable. You also have mental hygiene. Instead of thinking of like mental health, you have to uptake yourself, and sometimes you're grown in a situation where you're raised in a situation or an environment where you're not prioritizing your hygiene, your mental hygiene per se, and so it can lead you down a path. And so I think that instead of focusing on punishment, maybe the United States could benefit by having a system where there is punishment for those who have committed the crimes already, because you can't just go on and try to fix them if they've already gotten to that point, but to focus more on where these crimes being committed, what's the propensity, what's the like demographics, how can we try to prevent these people from growing into criminals. That's easier said than done, but there are like statistics that you can look at like what the average, like for example, for serial killer. I was really into psychoanalysis. I thought I was going to go down the route of being a behavioral analysis for a police department or something. So true crime is where like my passion started for law and politics. I just used to always wonder like how can these people commit these like sick crimes, and then you see these Netflix documentaries which romanticize serial killers, which I think is kind of gross, but you do get to see another side of like their upbringing, and you start to sympathize with them. Maybe not empathize, but sympathize, and you start to understand like, oh crap, their upbringing was so bad that this was their outlet for getting whatever was on their conscious out. It's sick, but like how do you approach that? What are the tell signs? We have CPS, we have other like agencies that are meant to do that job, but I mean, violent crime rates still seem to be persistent. I think they're higher now than they were in the 90s.
No, way down. Violent crime rates, they have dropped tremendously since the 1990s.
So violent crime rates have gone down.
Right?
Didn't you have the three strikes and outlaw, 3 strikes and you out?
Yeah, that led to a lot of people being imprisoned in many instances for very minor offenses that turned out to be a third strike. What I was going to add to all this was that our reaction seems to go in waves over many years. In the 1950s and 60s, you started to mention, we moved away from punishment more towards rehabilitation. But again, in the 1980s, I think we started to move back towards more punishment. I'm not sure whether we're headed in one direction or another right now, but these things seem to go back and forth from time to time. Should we move in a different direction? Should we? You seem to be advocating that we should move back towards the more rehabilitative.
Yeah, I don't think we need to focus entirely on rehabilitation. We don't have the infrastructure for that, and it's a little impractical. There's a couple police departments that have tried sending out with their before police arrive on scene. I forget the term that they use for it, but just somebody to check like mental health status of the person, and it hasn't really had a great impact on like the actual arrest rates. So it's kind of sucks, but it's like a ticking tally. It's like, oh, this worked, this didn't work, but we can look back on like history and like try to determine a strategy for this type of thing. My biggest thing is rehabilitation for criminals that are entering back into society. You have a criminal record, you have to apply for jobs, you have to apply for school if you'd like to. If you want to go to the military, there's options for that, but you have to get waivers from particular departments. And so it's almost like the punishment doesn't just stop when you're in, like once you gotten in trouble, it continues for the rest of your life. And that's the entire point, is to like scare you so bad that you never do it again. But it also causes like a lot of economic hardship. You have to pay for your court fees and potentially an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided to you, but once you get out of jail or if you get let off early and you have a probationary sentence, you gotta pay a monthly fee, you gotta pay X, you gotta pay Y, you gotta pay Z, and after it's all said and done, you've paid so much penance that you start, like, I call it self-fulfilling prophecy, or a lot of people know it like as labeling theory, but when somebody calls you something, you tend to believe it and you tend to act in that way. And so let's say you are somebody who's on their third strike in the state of Georgia, and it is for misdemeanors that are just adding up, tallying up. Well, the average person will look at it and be like, oh, that's not that bad, but once you hit that felony level, you lose a lot of your rights as a citizen. You have to live with this like shadow behind your back, and you go your entire life just like thinking that you are a criminal. And that's why I say that our criminal justice system doesn't necessarily rehabilitate. It creates this stigma around crime, and obviously we have like laws for a reason. We have to protect the greater society, but I'm very much so on like the board of I don't know. I wouldn't say our entire focus needs to be on rehabilitation, but there definitely needs to be a greater emphasis on different strategies to lower recidivism. I honestly think it's more of a cultural thing, depending on like the environment you grow up in. There's less stigmatization on what is considered morally apprehensible or not. And then like you look at the rap music, I love rap music, but when I'm singing these lyrics, I'm like, yeah, this is what I was doing in high school. This is like, but it goes with every genre. I think it's definitely, because it comes in waves, I think it's a cultural thing and not necessarily a systemic issue. So if the system isn't broken, then what is, and I don't know the answer to that.
Well, from what we've been talking about, does the system, it seems to suggest to me, and I'm not the expert again, but does the system actually allow people to fully reintegrate into society? Does the system, as it is structured, give people an actual chance? I mean, you seem to suggest that in many instances it doesn't, that you're labeled forever, that there are costs associated, that probably people who are committing crimes in the first place are doing it because they don't have the resources to live the kind of life that most people do. So is the system stacked against?
Yeah, but I think that's the intent with the system. It's like, when I think about it, like public hangings in France are supposed to scare the public. Like, look at what this guy did, don't do what he did. And it definitely in-groups, out-groups. Specifically, like, felonious crimes, in-groups, out-groups, it's like, oh, you don't want to do this because look at how bad your life could get. But it's a little inhumane, because those are people too. And they have lives and families. And it's not just you that gets punished by this crime, it's also the people that surround you. So whether you're a student or let's say you have a job and you have a family, like you're separating your family. I think that's a huge issue right now when it comes to like Trump's new border policy and who he's just appointed to become the new border czar or whatnot. One of the biggest questions that he was asked in Congress was by AOC was, are you incentivizing like separation of families? That's just like how the law works. If you come in illegally, then that is the law that you broke, and so you're taking that risk. And so that's the line of logic that our law system uses. And yeah, I would say it's probably a little inhumane, but I see the purpose of it. It's to deter. It's to deter, but I don't necessarily think it prevents anything, because people are going to break the law. Like you just said, they often don't have the resources. So even if it's shoplifting or like aggravated robbery or something, these are people that are in low life circumstances, and they're trying to find alternative means of reaching a specific goal, whatever that goal is. A lot of people like to criticize the idea of, I guess you could call it the American dream and capitalism here, because it's a winner-take-all mentality. Those who do the best, and it just creates more and more inequality. So you could think of it as those on the lower stratas are trying to make ends meet in a different way, alternative methods. So yeah, it's not a question that I'm even qualified enough to answer, but it's something I'm definitely interested about. But like I said, my area of interest was like psychoanalysis, and so like why do people end up committing crimes? And then once you start to figure out why these people are doing these particular things, it starts to like just unravel into an unruly mess, into rehabilitation. I think prevention is the biggest issue, or biggest like priority that law enforcement should focus on. When I was younger, the fire department and the police officers used to come to my elementary school, and they used to let us get on the truck or get in the car, and they would tell us about their job and what they're doing, and they wouldn't make it like, they try to come off to us as like not scary people. And then you have in some other instances, because I went to 2 different elementary schools, and then so this elementary school and then our high school eventually, we had resource officers on campus, and we would like be friends with them. They would come into the gym and shoot like basketball with us. But then at the other high school, everybody like hated the police, or at the other elementary school, everybody like hated the police. We were scared of the police, and so when you have a society that doesn't even respect the law enforcement or the authority, then you have a society that doesn't respect the rule of law in general, and that would lead to like a downward stream of like when they grow up, how are they going to feel, how are they going to react, and so yeah, it takes a community to raise a child, and it's not just like you or like your parents, but also those in the community. Like here in Dahlonega seems to be a very tight-knit community. That you being raised here, you know who your neighbors are and everything. Where I was raised, I didn't even know who the person in the apartment above me was. And so there's this little bit of superstition, this anxiety creeping. It's like, if you can't trust your neighbor, then who can you trust? So yeah, I don't know. It's all connected.
So, like our system definitely focuses on deterrence, but like just because they focus on that doesn't mean that it's going to work for every group of people. Like it might work for me. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I don't want to go to jail, but I can't say that for anybody. You know, like, and like you said, especially when we're considering like socioeconomic status, there's some people where that reward is really higher than the risk, or it's survival. But yeah, I agree that there needs to be more focus on rehabilitation. But I think also a lot of resources are, in my opinion, being focused on like the wrong issues. Like I mean, obviously every state is gonna have their own law about this, so like, who am I to say? But it's still a crazy concept to me that like we probably have a lot of people in jail for marijuana in our state, and then you can hop over next door. Is it, I think, South Carolina now that recreational? I'm not sure if we have any neighbors that have, but just to think that there's another state next door that has a completely different system, and obviously that's how it's set up. It's kind of how we like it because each state has different expectations. But I think it's focusing too much on too big of punishments for small crimes, and maybe even too big of punishments for bigger crimes. Like, I agree with the felony part, obviously depending on the crime, but I feel like that does follow you around for the rest of your life, and it impacts everything that you're able to do, and it can put you right back in the same spot where you are going to commit another crime or the same crime or whatever it may be. So I think, yes, focus on rehabilitation, but there are some crimes for me where I truly believe you should rot in jail for the rest of your life. So.
Well, we had years ago when political science and criminal justice were one department, we had a criminal justice faculty member who worked in the court system. and he described what they would refer to. I don't remember all the details, to be honest. This is a long time ago. 3 different types of defendants. The first type were sort of the incorrigibles. They're going to commit crimes no matter what, and it's pretty easy. You just throw the book at them. You just get them off the streets. On the other end, you have the people who just got in with the wrong crowd. They made a mistake. They are scared to death. They did something wrong, and they fully realize what happened. And you give them every opportunity to, push this aside and move on and get rid of it. He said the most difficult cases are the ones in the middle, that third group in the middle that are on the edge. They're in with the wrong crowd. They're not necessarily, they're not incorrigible necessarily, but again, they're in with the wrong crowd. They may be, focused on the wrong things. There's a possibility. And there, they said he said that was the most difficult people to deal with, because you don't know how to balance punishment with leniency. You don't know how to balance rehabilitation with punishment, and that's what makes it so difficult to really decide, because they don't, defendants don't come into court with labels on their heads saying which one they are. You have to determine that. That's why you have criminal psychologists, for example, to try and determine those things. It's not easy being part of the criminal justice system.
It's also, some crimes have, like based on the state legislature, have mandatory minimum sentences. And so if it's the defendants that you would tell the second group that are just made a mistake and they're scared, if they have committed that crime, then they can go to jail for a long time, and the judge can't give his or her discretion about that.
That's exactly right, and that's that was that. I talked about the waves that we go through. Again, in the 1950s and 60s, the movement was away from punishment and more towards rehabilitation. But in the 1980s, there was a move back towards punishment, and that's when those mandatory minimums were enacted. And now, in the 2010s and 2020s, you have more people saying judges should have some leniency if they can determine which of those 3 types those people are. They shouldn't have to throw the book at someone. They shouldn't have the discretion taken away if they do have evidence that it's someone who could be scared straight, someone who just made a mistake and is obviously never going to do anything like this again. And now you see a movement away from those mandatory minimums.
I think a lot of the times that the lesser crimes, like very minor misdemeanors, that receive a community service, I think that's a really big thing that is aimed at rehabilitation and changing behavior of the defendants. It's just, obviously you don't want your felons out on community service because they could be a flight risk or something like that. But if there are more sentences rather than just strict hard time in detention centers, I feel like our rehabilitation system would work better. But as far as I know, the rehabilitation that we have right now barely works.
I think it's really nuanced, and I think it's something that, I think there are some crimes that don't deserve rehabilitation. I think, if someone goes out and murders someone, yeah, to some extent you can help rehabilitate, help fix, but also, I grew up going to church, and there was this one family there, and it recently came out that he had been sexually molesting his kids for 20 plus years now. He should rot in jail. Absolutely. I do not think he deserves the chance to rehabilitate. He made that decision over and over again for 20 years. I'm sorry that he went to.
I think there are people and defendants, and again, I'm not the expert, on the fringes of those 3 different types that are very easy to determine. But there are an awful lot that are in that middle area where it's really difficult to make the decision. That may have been one where it's just really easy to determine.
Absolutely, and I think you can be scared and you can be oh oh no, like I don't want to go to prison, blah, blah, blah. You can see that in people's eyes, but also I think to some extent you can manipulate that a little bit. So rehabilitation is like a really hard line because I don't think a lot of people deserve that. Because you should have thought about that before you committed the crimes. And yes, I think like when you're on the lower end economically, like yes, there are some things that like, oh, like I can't do this, I can't get out here, I can't do that. But also like you need to think about what you do.
It's also like corruption too. Like there's a line where yes, you should really help rehabilitate the person, but also if there's a victim involved, how do you try to make that as right?
Yeah, why don't you last word and then we'll close this out. You can give us some closing thoughts.
I think that it all starts at a very young age, and a new statistic just came out recently that preschoolers and elementary school students are getting suspended and expelled at higher rates than have ever been seen in American history, particularly young boys. So that's not very encouraging for future aspects of the country. So yeah, just to leave you guys on the edge of your seats. There you go.
Yeah, well, actually, I do want to close it out, but to follow up on that, there are some who will argue that that's an artifact of simply putting more police in schools. That there's, when I was growing up, there were no police in schools, and so kids were not being accused of crimes in schools. They were just, taken aside and yelled at or whatever. But now with police in school, the same thing now produces a criminal record. And so it might be an artifact, again, of that movement more towards punishment and away from rehabilitation. But again, okay, we're just about out of time, so you want to close us out?
Thank you guys for a great semester. I'm not sure if we'll be meeting 2 weeks from now, so I hope you guys get to see your families, have a happy Thanksgiving or fall break, whatever you want to do next week. You don't have school, so don't come here at 12 on Wednesday. I hope to see you guys next semester. We're going to start planning that out shortly but surely, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, they're all going in this room over this side.